everybody, my name's Michelle and this is my channel Sewing Bunny. Thank you so much for joining me in my video today, which is my comparison between what I would call normal tracing paper and Swedish tracing paper. I know that a lot of you did request this video when I mentioned about doing it in one of my other videos, so I really hope that you enjoy what my thoughts are behind both papers. So before I get started, I will just let you know what I'm wearing. This is the Pattern Scissors Cloth Galaxy tee in this lovely pink jersey. If you hear any noise, it is raining at the moment outside again, yeah, apologies if you can hear any noise. Okay, so what I've done with the papers is I have kind of split it into about 7 different categories, just to go through kind of like my thoughts and everything. Now, I will be looking down because I've got some notes, and I also have my laptop to one side here so that I can go through some of the pictures that I'll be bringing up on screen and some videos. Just because I thought that would be the easiest way of comparing the two. So the two papers that I have, the first one, which I would say is the normal tracing paper. This is this one here. This is from Moreplan. I will be going over obviously like price and everything like that a bit later on in the video, but this is my one that I have been purchasing for the last few months. I did go through a stage of, you know, trying out sort of different ones, but this one I find for me is probably the one that I use the most now, and I have reordered it on quite a few occasions. So I thought this would be the best one to share with you on that. So that I paid for all with my own money. There's absolutely no kind of sort of connection with Moreplan at all. Now this one is the Swedish tracing paper, and this is from Pattern Trace. Now I do have to say that I was given this for free in exchange for mentioning it in one of my videos, which I did in an earlier video. But I decided to actually do this comparison video because it's a video that I wanted to see, like if I hadn't have tried Swedish tracing paper. So even though I was given this for free, I do want to just make it clear that this is all my own personal opinion and everything. It's got nothing to do with Pattern Trace. But again, I'll go through pricing and everything of this. So those are the two papers. So what I would do first is I'm going to just go through what the 7 sort of categories are, which I hope sort of covers anything that you need to know about the papers. So first off, what they feel like, what they trace like, what it's like marking them, what it's like cutting them, what it's like with the Swedish tracing paper doing a twirl, because you can sew with this and you can't obviously with the normal paper, the pricing, and then lastly my overall thoughts and opinions, which one would I buy myself. Okay, so I hope that covers it. Okay, so let's get going with each of those categories. Okay, so feel. So I thought you might want to know a little bit about how the papers feel, like what their weights are, what it's like scrunching them up, etc. Now with all of my categories, I'm going to start off with the Swedish tracing paper first, followed then by the standard tracing paper. So the Swedish tracing paper, what does this feel like? So it does feel very, very lightweight. And it feels very, very soft. You can see the transparency there. If you kind of scrunch it up to the side, it does kind of scrunch a little bit like normal paper, but you can flatten it out really, really nicely. On one side, it is incredibly soft and smooth, and on the other side, it's probably maybe ever so slightly more matte, I would say. So I'd say one side is slightly shinier than the other, but not overly so. You probably wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between this side and this side because it does feel very, very similar. As I say, it's very, very lightweight, floaty and airy. And so, yeah, very lightweight to store away. And as you can see there, rolling it is very, very easy. So that is the Swedish tracing paper. On to the standard tracing paper. So as you'd expect, it's very papery. So if I scrunch up this end, You can see again, it's very, very crumpled. You can again lie it out flat. This one, it's not as lightweight. If you can see, it doesn't float as much, and you can't really see my hand behind it as I'm going along like the Swedish tracing paper. It does roll really, really nicely, and this one definitely does have a shiny side on this side, and then this side is matte. I've got absolutely no idea if that is showing up at all, but yeah, it's definitely shinier on this side. So me personally, when I'm tracing, I always, when I roll out this one, I always trace on the inside, which is like the matte side. This side is the shiny side, so I tend to lie that down flat on the paper and I trace from the inside. The Swedish tracing paper, you can do either side because yeah, the difference between the shiny side and the matte side is very, very minimal. So you probably wouldn't notice that at all. So tracing, probably the most important part of tracing paper is how does it trace? Now what I did in my examples here is I used a big 4 sewing pattern, which is that thin tracing paper, because I find that for me is usually the hardest to see when you're tracing, because it's already on such thin paper and the lines can sometimes be quite faint. That's what I used to show it off, so I hope that shows it nicely. So I'll insert a picture to start off with of the Swedish tracing paper and what that looks like. You'll see on the flat lay here that it is very, very see-through. You can see most of all the lines on there, quite easily seen. Now I do have to say that the lighting when I took these pictures and videos was my lighting you know, with my light on in the sewing room. It wasn't natural light, so sometimes I do find it can be a little bit more difficult to trace when it isn't natural light, but I thought I will do the actual light in the sewing room because then that'll be the best way of testing it. So yeah, that one you can see is really nice and see-through. And then again, what I've done here is I've kind of shown you what it's the difference between what it's like on the paper and the tracing, and you can quite clearly see those there. You might have to slightly press down to kind of see some of the size numbers there. But yeah, overall, again, on the bust there, you can see the writing's a little bit blurry, and then when you actually press it down, it's actually quite easily seen. I think that is very, very easily traceable. You wouldn't have any problems not tracing those lines at all. And then on to the normal tracing paper. Now in this picture you will see that actually it's not as see-through as the Swedish tracing paper. It is slightly thicker, and you can definitely tell that because when I showed you how it kind of feels, you could see that it was a heavier weight of paper. Now the grams on this one I will have to look up and see how much it is, but this is just like the standard one that I get from Morplan. So you can see the lines through it, but it's like not as much as the Swedish tracing paper. Again, I've done the same test, which is against the pattern, and if you can press it down, you can see the numbers a little bit more. Not as much as the Swedish tracing paper, but I think enough to be able to trace it okay. Again, with the bust, going over the wording there, you can make it out, but just not as much as the Swedish tracing paper. So I hope that helps there with how it is to trace. What I will do now is I will go over about the markings. So markings, so this one I did think was quite an important one, because depending on what pens, pencils you use, you might want to see how they react to the different papers. So I tested 3 pens. My favourite pen to use is one of these fine liners. This is like a felt tip pen. I really like this because it gives you quite a thick line, and it means that when I cut my patterns, I can cut on the line, not either side of the line. So that's my preferred one. I also used a ballpoint pen just because I know that's probably one a lot of people use as well, and probably is maybe the most popular one for tracing. And then also I used a pencil as well. I mean, these are just the examples. I'm not sure if these are the ones I actually used in the videos I tested, but yeah, pencil, because again, just want to kind of see how that reacts to the papers. So I will insert the footage here. So first off, I tried out my favourite fine liner. So as I said, this one is like a felt tip pen. And what I've just done is I've just done some swirls because I thought that would be the easiest way of showing it with you. So this is the Swedish tracing paper first. Now you can see on there, it has bled a little bit. You can kind of see that there are some sort of blotches to it. And then next up, I used the ballpoint pen. I'll flick it out. And again, just doing those swirls. And on this one, you might be able to see just at the top of where I've kind of doubled over, there is a little bit of blotching at the top as well. So yeah, it is, because it's that type of paper, I think it maybe like absorbs some of the ink a little bit. And then lastly, the pencil. Again, doing those swirls. This was lovely and smooth to use, really, really nice. And you can see it does stand out quite well on that. And what I thought would be a good idea is to actually, once I've done all those little swirls, was to actually lift up the paper and see if any of it had transferred. So if I play that video, you'll see when I lift it up that, yep, the fine liner has bled through. So yeah, that was the Swedish tracing paper for all of those. So yeah, because it is slightly lighter weight, then yeah, it has transferred through on the felt tip. It was okay on the biro, on the ballpoint, and it's absolutely fine on the pencil. So that was the Swedish tracing paper. Now, if we go to the standard tracing paper, so again, same thing. I'm using, again, my felt tip on here, which is the one that I normally do use with this paper. And again, just doing those little swirls. This one, lovely and smooth, and no blotching at all on that one. And then next up, I used the ballpoint pen again. And again, similar with that, just doing those swirls. And again, no blotching. You can see that it doesn't have any of those marks at the top like it did on the Swedish tracing paper. And then lastly, the pencil. As you'd expect, this one absolutely fine on here, really nice and smooth to use. So on that one, all three markers were really, really good on that one. And I will do the video of me lifting up the paper. And as you can see on that one, no markings at all. And that is because the paper is a little bit thicker. The Swedish tracing paper is very, very thin, almost like a fabric kind of feel, whereas the normal tracing paper is, as you'd expect, it is just paper and you don't expect any markers to kind of bleed through. So yeah, I think the Swedish tracing paper, even though it's really nice and light, you just got to be a bit careful what you used. So when I cut out my pattern, I did use the pencil because I thought that was going to be the best option. On my usual sort of normal tracing paper, I would always use my felt tip, as I say, because I like to mark the lines and I like to cut on the line. So I thought this one would be quite a nice one just to talk about, just because you might want to know what it is like to cut the paper. Now I know that could be quite an obvious thing, you know, well, it should cut absolutely fine. But what I tend to do is when I'm cutting patterns is I use a variety of movements when I'm cutting. So all I've done on both of these examples is just cut a straight line, but I've tried to do kind of, you know, short snips and like a long drag. Because I'm not sure about you guys, but if I'm using tracing paper, I want to cut it out as quickly as I can. And I use a variety of short snips. And also if I'm doing like a long straight line, I sort of hold the scissors and drag it across the paper. So I've done that for both. So to start off with the Swedish tracing paper, so I've just laid this out on my table here, and I'm just doing some sort of short snips and then doing a bit of a drag along if I can. Now on the Swedish tracing paper, I couldn't get a drag, if that makes sense. So I couldn't get my scissors positioned well enough to drag it through. And I think that might have been because it is a little bit lighter weight, and I was a bit worried about potentially ripping the paper. Now I do have some stills here that I can share with you, which is what it looks like from my cutting. So that was where I was cutting straight, and you can see there's no snags at all. But on some bits, I did find a couple of little rips as I was kind of cutting. So those ones just to be aware of, I think, on there. I mean, there's nothing bad at all. It didn't rip or do anything like that. But yeah, it was a bit of a mixture of a really smooth line and a little bit of tearing against, when I was kind of doing my shorter snips. Now onto the normal tracing paper. Again, this is just me cutting it on my table. I've done it at a slightly different angle on this one, but you can see I'm doing some short snips on there, and then you can see I can angle and I can glide my scissors quite through. Again, shorter snips at the end. And if I pop the stills here as well for you, so you can see this is the straight line. This is where I've kind of done that running cut, so it's very nice and straight. And then on my short sort of jaggedy sort of snips, you can see on there minimal tearing on there. Not a very even line because obviously I was just stretching over and cutting, but yeah, not much tearing. Again, I think it's because the Swedish tracing paper is lighter, so it is a little bit more fragile. So that's what it's like cutting. So on to the Twirl. So I've put this in because this is the Swedish tracing paper only. Normal tracing paper, I mean, yes, potentially you could sew it, but the whole point with Swedish tracing paper is the fact that you can sew it and use it as Twirl fabric. And this is what I was probably most interested in, and I'm pretty sure this is probably what most of you are interested in as well. So what I've done on here is I have done some videos, so I'll insert those. And so on here you can see that I have set quite a long stitch length because I'm wanting to baste it. I don't want to do short, but I have gone forward and backwards on my machine, and I have put all the pieces together. Now you can see it does jump around a little bit. It's not really smooth, but I didn't have any problems on the machine. But you do have to make sure that your hand is flat on it. You can't just kind of leave it to its own devices. You do have to have some control with it because otherwise it could slip around. And I put those little clips on just to kind of hold it in place. And then I've done some stills here where you can see the stitch line nice and straight, and you can see where I've gone forward and back that it does work really well. I've also done a little video here of me doing some darts because again I thought that would be a good one to share, and I say as long as you're holding the paper it does work really nicely. So yeah, overall lovely to sew with. And a really good idea that you can sew with it, I think. So what I did is I did make a top, which was, I can't remember what the pattern number was. I'll pop a picture of it in here. But yeah, it was a little top pattern. And what I decided to do was just to make the bodice and just see how I got on. So again, I will insert a picture of me wearing this this Twirl fabric. So as you can see here, there's hello. Sorry, the lighting's not great, but yeah, I'm wearing it there, and you can see that it does actually fit quite nicely. I'm lining up there to see, does it go nicely on the back? Obviously, I'll put a button at the top when I've done there, but it lines up really nicely. You can see the sides line up really well. And I'm just testing how, how much gap there is. Does it fall quite nicely? I mean, yes, it is, paper at the end of the day. It lines up really nicely on the shoulders, so I was really happy with that. Now, I did lower the neckline on this one. and I'm just popping there sort of like where my underarms are, because it was quite tight. I did find that a little bit on the final one. And also my bust darts, making sure, did they line up all right? So I found that really helpful to have. You can see there, I did rip it, obviously when I was moving about on there, but I did try and do a little repair job on there. So I will share that with you as well. So I did find it really, really helpful being able to pop it on and actually see where were my bust darts, where were my side seams, did they line up all right, were my shoulder seams okay, my neckline. I did mention just quickly there that I did actually end up lowering that neckline, as I did find it a little bit high up. I wish I had lowered the under the arms, because I did find that with my final version that it was a bit high. But I kind of thought at the time that it'd be all right. But it just goes to show this Twirl did actually show everything that I wanted it to do. I wanted to make sure that it all fit me in the right places. And I was able to make some small adjustments from doing that. Now I did obviously do like a little rip on one side, but I will show you how I sort of patched that up and everything, and you would never ever know. Now, one thing with this is that's me popping it on. Now, I did do a little video of me actually taking it off, because I know that a lot of people might struggle with that. And because I did have that rip, was it just going to completely disintegrate? Now, if you're having something where you've got a zip at the back, then of course you would just pin it in place. But because this one was a pull on and pull off top, it was woven, the pattern, I wouldn't have done it with jersey. I wanted to kind of show you what it looked like getting it off. So this is a little bit of a funny one. I'll insert the video here. So yeah, this is me trying to get it off, feeling a bit nervous about taking it off, but just very gently lifting it up over my head and just making sure that I'm not going to rip it. So yeah, this did take a little bit of sort of wiggling around, but just being very gentle with it, and yet managed to then pop it off and I'm free. So yeah, with no damage. So yeah, I thought you might quite like that one, because yeah, it just goes to show that even just with a little bit of persuasion taking it off, it still didn't rip. Now I will insert again some video here of when I unpicked it all. So you can see the darts there. So there's no ripping or anything as I took all of those stitches out, even with my, you know, going forward and back. And you can see here, this is where I repaired it, just with a bit of sticky tape. You can barely see it there, but that is where I had that rip on the arm, and you would never ever know. Absolute perfect fix on that. And then I've just got some stills here as well, where you can kind of actually see the little puncture holes on there. Again, you know, just so easy, just pulling out the threads. Even with me going forwards and backwards on the machine, I was able to get my unpicker, just pick out those stitches, and it was all nice and flat, which meant I was then able just to transfer it straight onto my fabric. Now, of course, if you were going to make any tweaks and changes, then, you know, you might want to re-sketch your pattern, or you might want to, you know, kind of make some more tweaks and things. But overall, I found it really, really helpful to do that. So yeah, as Twirl fabric, absolutely brilliant. So you can trace your pattern and use it as Twirl fabric. So I think for me, that is definitely win-win. Okay, so again, another really important one here, which I think is about price. So this is standard on both websites. So this is Pattern Trace for the Swedish tracing paper and More Plan for the tracing paper that I use. Now, by all means, there are other websites. I'm just going on the two that I have got. You might be able to find prices completely different from other websites, so please do shop around. I'm just going on the ones that I have. So if you guys have any sort of other, you know, sort of like people that you use, please feel free to pop it in the comments so that everyone else can kind of see. But these are just the two that I have used. So I've got my notepad here so that I have got it right. So first off with the Swedish tracing paper, as I say, this is from Pattern Trace. So if you want to get some of this, it does come in a variety of roll lengths. So you can get it in 1 roll, you can get 2 rolls, you can get 4 rolls, and you can get 10 rolls. Now I've just done how much it would be for the 1 roll, the 2 rolls and the 4 rolls, because I just thought that would be a bit similar to kind of what I'd got from my normal tracing paper. So for the Swedish tracing paper, for 1 roll, you get 10 meters of that. And it is a meter, there we go, a meter wide. So 100 centimeters wide, and you get 10 meters length. So the price for this for 1 roll is £15.90. I haven't included any postage or anything like that on any of these, because obviously it depends where you are in the world. So £15.90 for 1 roll. That works out as £1.59 a metre. Now, if you were to get 2 rolls of this, it's £28, so you get more of a discount, which works out to £1.40 a metre. And if you were to get 4 rolls, you get that for £48.50, which works out as £1.21 a metre. So that is for the Swedish tracing paper. Now, the thing you do have to bear in mind with the Swedish tracing paper is that you can use it for Twirl fabric as well as tracing. So just bear that in mind, I think, with the price and how much you get. Now, for the other paper, oh, is that going to stay? I'm just like balancing it. There we go. For my More Plan paper. Now this, just for me, I find is probably some of the best value paper, because you can buy it on quite big rolls. So this is 90 centimeters wide. So it's 10 centimeters shorter than the Swedish tracing paper. So it's just shy of a meter, which for me I find is actually kind of okay. So it's 90 centimeters wide, but the roll is 50 meters. So you get 50 meters from 1 roll. You can also get a massive roll from More Plan as well. But to be honest, I personally would find that too much. I think it's something like 300 meters, and I wouldn't be able to store that amount. But the 50 meter one works really, really well for me and does last me quite a while. So pricing on this. So this is for a 50 meter roll. It is, well, if you go onto the website, it does say one price, but then you've got to include VAT. So I've done the price with VAT. So all you'd need to do is just add on the postage. So the price for this is £24.44, which works out at 48p a metre. So quite a difference, obviously, in the two. And that leads me on to my final point. So what are my final thoughts? Which one would I use? Now, in all honesty, I would probably say that my normal tracing paper that, again, I picked up from More Plan, I love this tracing paper. I like how wide it is. I like that it comes on a 50 meter roll, and I like the price because it is really nice and cheap. Now, there are other tracing papers, as I say, you can use. So, you know, I'm just going on what my paper is. But yeah, I find this one, it traces reasonably well, yet you can't see through it as much as the Swedish tracing paper. But, you know, it's still really, really nice to use, cuts nicely, works well with all my markers, and is a really, really nice everyday option. This I would 100% use for most of my tracing, and I don't think that I would ever not carry on buying this. This is just my personal opinion on that. I really, really like it. However, it's not a fact that I wouldn't buy the Swedish tracing paper. I am so pleased that I actually gave the Swedish tracing paper a go, because I really, really like it, and I will certainly be buying more of it. I won't be tracing my standard sort of patterns with it. And when I say standard patterns, I mean ones that I know that I don't want to twirl. So I wouldn't use this and not use it as a twirl, because I would use this, you know, the normal tracing paper, because why would I use more expensive paper on something that I'm not going to use as a twirl? So for things like jersey patterns, or like handbag patterns or all those sort of things, you know, things where I know I'm not going to twirl it. Again, with jersey, again, I couldn't twirl it even if I wanted to, because jersey has negative ease and it wouldn't fit properly. However, if I was to make myself, you know, a woven dress pattern or something, I would definitely trial out the bodice on the Swedish tracing paper so that I could sew it together and see how it fits. I found it so valuable having, you know, that little twirl kind of showing where the bust darts were, where the shoulders were, where the side seams were. And then it means that I wouldn't have to use any fabric. Now, I know some people might be like, Michelle, why don't you just use cheap fabric to do a twirl? Well, first off, I can't trace my pattern using cheap fabric. Also, fabric takes longer to decompose than paper. This Swedish tracing paper is actually compostable. That's one thing that Pattern Trace do have on their website, is the fact that it can be composted, which means it is much more environmentally friendly. I wouldn't want to do a twirl in cheap fabric and then put that fabric into, you know, textile recycling or even worse, landfill or something like that, because I don't think that's very sustainable. If you use the Swedish tracing paper, I mean, to be honest, even if you bought just the one 10-metre roll, which is what, £1.59 a metre, I mean, you can't get fabric at £1.59 a metre. So actually, I think this is a lot better option. So I really like both papers, and I'm sorry that I haven't picked one or the other, but I would buy both because they're just really good in their own ways. For my everyday sewing or jersey patterns, definitely I would use the normal tracing paper, but for anything that I wanted to twirl in, then definitely the Swedish tracing paper is 100% the best option. It's really, really nice to use. I would also say that if you have any sort of like sight issues, and maybe sometimes you think I need a tracing paper that's really see-through, then this could be a really good option for you as well, because it is a lot lighter weight than other papers. If you were to get a standard paper, oh, just dropped my other roll there. If you were to buy standard tracing paper at this width, then I'll be perfectly honest, you'll probably find it will rip all the time. Whereas this being that sort of almost fabric-y sort of paper feeling, you won't have to worry about it getting ripped. So that could be another option for you as well. So let me know what you think. Did you find that helpful, or what do you think? Do you prefer Swedish tracing paper to normal paper, or do you prefer normal tracing paper to Swedish tracing paper? Have you ever tried Swedish tracing paper? I'd love to know, so please do pop a comment down below. If you did enjoy the video, please do give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, it would be lovely if you could. So I hope you enjoyed, and take care everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye.